Hello, and welcome to episode 24 of the Oikos Family Podcast. My name is Sonja Wood, and today I'd love to share with you about being an example. The reason why I've chosen this particular topic is that in previous podcasts, I've touched on it here and there about the importance of being an example. And it's really been on my heart. So I thought at the next podcast, I really must share more with you on this particular topic. And the best place to share with you about this is actually from the Word. So I'm going to just start there. From 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12, it says, "Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." So I want to just chat a little bit about that and just say, let us be an example in our speech. Let us not be prone to anger. Let our conduct show our children and those around us that we are believers. Let them see Jesus in us. And let us walk in love towards one another, because, after all, he did say that that is his greatest commandment. In Titus 2, verse 6 to 7, "Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity and dignity." And then in John 13, verse 15, "For I have given you an example that you should always do just as I have done." That one's a tough one. How do we always do exactly what he has done? He's shown us what he did and how his example has been before us, him being Jesus. And so the way to know how to be this kind of example that he has been is to get to know him. And the way to get to know him is through his word. And so that's why I'm reading his word to you and sharing his word with you today. John 13, verse 35 says, "By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have loved one another." So there's just a few scriptures, and I know there's many more that you can, I hope, be encouraged by at the importance of being an example to your children. I want to just talk a little bit practically about this now, because it was a very important part of my upbringing, and I think because of that, it was shared with me, and then I could share it with our children. And let me just give you a little practical example. If your child answers the phone on your behalf, and you say to the child, "Tell whoever that is that I'm not here," that now has been an example of being untruthful. Okay, so if you were to do that, you've basically shown your child how not to tell the truth, how not to speak the truth. So that's quite serious, because that is the example that has been set for that child. I know in our household, if that were to happen, like if we were to answer the telephone in those days when I was a child, and the telephone that was connected to the wall with a wire, with a cord, if it rang and one of us children went to answer it and my mother wasn't able to take the call, she would tell us to tell the person, she would be an example of telling us how to deal with that situation in a way whereby she didn't need to come to the phone, but at the same time she didn't expect or say to us to not tell a truth. So an example would have been when we were on our way to the phone was ringing, she would say, "Tell whoever that is that I'm not able to come to the phone at the moment, but get a message and take their name and apologize and tell them I will call them back when I can." So that is the example that I experienced. You see, I experienced my mother. It was like teaching a skill almost, how to be polite and how to take a message and how to get the number right. And there was a whole lot of skills, actually, that she was teaching us, and they weren't just about telling the truth. There were other skills there that we were learning, as you've obviously gathered. So that is just a tiny example that I'm wanting to share with you, practical example. I know it's different now because it's cell phones, and actually I think moms sometimes look at the phone, at the screen, and see who it is and think, "Oh, I can't talk to that person now for whatever reason." And then they can just turn the phone off, stop it from ringing. I know I've done that, actually. We can be in a discussion about something and I see a call come through and I put my phone on silent because then I think I'll just get back to that person when it's more appropriate, when the time is more appropriate. But that's just something that you're doing quietly. I mean, if I looked at the screen and said, oh, no, I don't want to talk to that person now, well, then that wouldn't be a good example because I would be now sharing that bad example with the people that are in my presence. So I'm just hoping that today's podcast that you're listening to, let me just stop there, right there, and say thank you for listening because I really found this quite a huge privilege to be able to talk to you. I really am constantly amazed at what a blessing it is for me to be able to just talk to you and do these podcasts and be able to have this moment that I can chat to you. And in this moment, I'm just really quite serious about encouraging you, about thinking about the kind of example you've been all the time, whether it's in the traffic, whether it's standing in a queue and the queue is long. And now, how are you handling that situation while you stand in the queue at the grocery shop? Whatever you do is going to be either reflecting or not reflecting something either good or bad. So I want to encourage you, really, really encourage you to stop and think about the kind of example you've been, because this thing I do know, and that is that if you've been a good example and if you're thinking about it and you're sharing love and kindness and gentleness, you are going to be blessed. I just experience it all the time. I'm really speaking from personal testimony experience here, that if you feel that frustration rising and that annoyance for whatever it might be, for example, we have a lot of load shedding, a lot of power outages in our country at the moment. I'm speaking from South Africa. And you can be in a shop and you can hear and the lights go off and everybody just goes, oh, you just hear the sound of despair from everybody who's in the shop at the time. And, I was just thinking about that and thinking, I wonder how we can change that, because there's a lot of good that can come from not having a luxury or a privilege or I'm calling it a luxury and a privilege. I suppose it's just a basic necessity because electricity has become a basic necessity. And we become a bit complacent with just having it. So when we don't have it, it's, and there's a complaint, immediate complaint. But then there's also so much good that can come from that if we just stop in that moment and think, okay, so we don't have power, we don't have electricity, so now what? In fact, I'm just going to be bold now and just tell you that when we don't have electricity, we have dinner by candlelight. And I think to myself, you know what? We wouldn't be having a candlelight dinner tonight if we had power, because we would have lights. But because we've got an outage of our electricity supply, we're having to do something else. And we end up doing the something else we end up doing, to me, is richer. It's a better experience than having just had the convenience available to us. So now this is seemingly going off topic here, but I hope you don't experience it like that. I hope you realize that actually I'm using these examples to say that in every instance we have an opportunity to either be a good example or not so good example. And I'm saying to you that whatever one you are going to be, you are passing that on to your children. So if you be a bad example in that moment, that's the example they're seeing. They think it's normal to be angry with something that you're always angry about. You are being an example of anger, and they will be angry about that same thing. I know this sounds like an impossibility because parenting doesn't just happen, and you are not just, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. Our last born is 25 years old, and I'm aware all the time on the kind of example that I can be setting before him, but in a different way now. When it comes to discussing business matters or financial things or whatever it might be, that the way that one manages or handles or reacts to things is actually setting an example. So I do just want to ask you to be aware of it. That's what I'm asking you. I know none of us are perfect, and I know that we have to constantly be conscious of this fact of being an example. It's a big responsibility, and we should take it seriously. And when we think, oh, well, I can't be a good example because I myself am just become very irritated with certain things, well, then that's when you've got Psalm 23. That's when you've got the word where you can, I'm saying Psalm 23 now, so hopping back to that, because in the previous podcast I shared Psalm 23 and it's just so beautiful. But that's where you have the word. Just like I've read the word to you at the beginning of this podcast about being an example and how he helps us to, in his word, to be that very example. He says, I've shown you what to do. I've shown you, I've been the example for you, so be that. And so we might think, oh, well, that's a bit of an impossibility. I can't do that. But we can do all things in Christ who strengthens us. You see, that's the gift, that's the beauty, that's what's so amazing. I know that I don't have enough patience, but I know that he's got patience in abundance. So when my patience starts running thin, I know I can just immediately be reminded, oh, okay, I don't have enough patience for this, but I can call on him because he has more than enough. He has overflowing patience. It's just an abundance. So I've always got him that I can go to. So I hope that you stopping by today to listen to this podcast is going to encourage you to go to him, to be the example he needs you to be, and allow his example in you to shine through. That's what I hope for you today. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.